Before we begin, I'd like to do kind of a thing, if that's okay. I'm going to put a timestamp down below for those of you who are only interested in hearing about Megaman 11, so go ahead and click that if you want to. There should be a thing in the timeline too. Assuming I do it correctly, which I will assume I will, because I hope so, but that's in the future, so I can only presume I did it correctly later. The very nature of an audit run was something that has kind of bounced around my head several times, and it's something that I've been considering pretty much ever since we finished the Oblivion run. When we finished Oblivion, up until now, all of those runs I stand behind firmly. I think they're good, I think they're codified, and I'm with it. Everything before that is a little bit more iffy. Now, we have done 2 audit runs, Megaman 7 and Megaman 11. Both of those runs revealed that those scores were true. Like, I didn't really disagree with my past self, but I had more to say about it because the very nature of how we've been reviewing has changed. That's kind of the thing, right? It's kind of an iterative process. But the reason I want to bring this up is this is something that was especially important to me because the reviewing is something I've been wanting to do since, honestly, probably since I was in high school. The idea of actually objectively codifying and categorizing and seeing which is good, why, and where, and really digging into those details is something that's always been a desire of mine. Being able to do this for the show is awesome. And as a further aside, thank you all of you for your assistance in making this possible. Right? Like, I literally would not be able to do this without you. So thank you. But I'm getting back to the audit thing. I wanted to give a little bit of a history thing on why the audit thing is kind of an acceptable concept. You see, when I first started reviewing, I did a little bit of a different system. What I do is off to the side, not on camera, not on OBS. Like, I literally had a pad and a paper, which I later turned into a notepad, just a text file, where I would keep track of things that I would consider to be positives and things I would consider to be negatives. Those terms were pretty loosely defined back then because I hadn't quite had a chance and experience to be able to codify them into what they are now. And nowadays I have a very strong feeling and vibe for what a positive is, what a negative it is, and how much it takes to fill up a positive in terms of aggregates, right? But that's with experience. That's with years of experience at this point. So at the time it was just, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, and a fairly basic system there too. After a while, people started asking on stream, what are you doing? It's like, well, I like this, so I wanted to give it a positive. It never even occurred to me that the viewers would want to actually be a part of that process. Naturally, they did. So the suggestion was made, well, why don't you start going ahead and putting that on camera? So I did. I started saying, okay, that's plus to gameplay. That's negative to story. Actually, we had 4 axes back in the day. We then later condensed those into 2. And so I started showing those in the HUD. Some of you may remember, I believe, the Mass Effect Andromeda run, and I'm pretty sure the Dragon Age Inquisition run both had that. But it was still in its infancy until it reached a point, and I know this specific run, it was Shadow of War. As I was in the middle of the run, we weren't even at the beginning, it was in the middle, someone was in chat, because of course you guys come up with the good ideas and all I do is implement them. Someone said, why don't you actually write down the pluses and minuses rather than just 7 pluses to gameplay? Why don't you explain what they are? And I was like, well, that's a good idea. I've never occurred to me to do that. So sure, yeah, give me a second. And so I started typing it up. This is why that is effectively the beginning of the reviews. Why the first review, at least I'm pretty sure it's Shadow of War. I think there might be one that's technically predates. I can just check the timestamps right here. Nope, Shadow of War, October 17th, 2017. It was our very first review, and it was the very first time we actually wrote that stuff down. So that's technically our first review, even though we had been reviewing games before that. In fact, there's several dozen games we reviewed before that. None of those count because none of that was really notated or documented, and of course it was a completely different system we were using at the time. You know, something with 15 inches and something with 15 centimeters, something with 16 centimeters. 16 centimeters doesn't win because you're literally using a different metric, right? Pun intended. So, okay, we started writing down the pluses and minuses, but we were still absolutely just flailing to try and figure it out. I forget the game where we first came up with the concept of an aggregate. Something that's not a full positive, not a full negative, but something that's partial. That was another innovation from you all, because I'm telling you, you guys just come up with all the cool ideas here. And then we kind of started evolving and developing that bit by bit until it was like, okay, well, we're starting to codify this idea a little bit more. We're starting to come up with more concepts. And as we went along, we've hammered down some specifics. We started coming up with the 3 idea. 1 is good, 2 is great, 3 is best for both positives and negatives. So like the best music I've ever heard, or the best boss fight, or whatever, that kind of stuff. So we came up with the 3 cap system that came up during Divinity Original Sin. We came up with the idea of differentiating how music and music direction works. We came up with the idea of codifying many, many different concepts. And fast forward quite a bit, and we got to Oblivion. Oblivion is actually when we sat down and said, okay, we're officially, we've got our system, we've got our format, we've got everything lined up. This is when the review system totally is starting. Because that's why I say Oblivion is kind of the line there, because Oblivion and Forwards is all games that we have been doing under this current system, with all the pieces and parts in play, and nothing has changed since then. We haven't altered our system since then. What's funny is that was last October 8th, 2020. So we've only actually had our current review system for just over a year. That's how iterative this has been. But we haven't actually changed in the last year, whereas previously we would change it every few months. Earlier this year, some of you remember, we were going through our runs, and we got to Vampire the Masquerade, Coteries of New York. That was in July. And I looked at that, and I looked at its review, and I was comparing it to one of my previous reviews, and I'm like, that doesn't line up. Remember what I mentioned about the inches and the centimeters? I was like, well, okay, going back and doing a full audit run of all of those games is not happening. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. So what I came up with is the audit spreadsheet. And this is actually what we use nowadays as well. The audit spreadsheet is columns of categories. Now, it's not a checklist let me walk that back. It is a checklist, but it's what a checklist should be. It's not there to tell you what to do. It's there to prompt you what to do. It's there to invoke ideas or help remind you of stuff that you otherwise would forget. And this is something that's fairly common in human beings in all aspects of life. Even if something is X or something is Y, you might forget to notate that, and that's important, especially when you're doing something like this. So we have the audit sheet to prompt us, to remind us, and it's a good way to compare. This game's sprite work is really, really good, but is it some of the best sprite work we've ever seen, or is it merely very good? And thus we can determine whether it deserves 1, 2, or 3 as per the previous thing. And just stuff like that. It's a quick, easy visual representation of that method. And we sat down and I spent several weeks auditing all the previous games to get them up to code. But all that was done by memory. And there's only so much I can do with that. And if I'm being 100% honest, most of these previous games are never going to be 100% accurate unless I do a full audit run. But again, that's not feasible. So I was very hesitant to even accept the idea of an audit run, even though it's an ideal, just because of the time and cost involved. But as we were going through the Megamans, we were going to skip over 7 and 11 for the obvious reasons. And many people expressed an interest in going back through them. And I bent on this point because A, I wanted to replay them too, B, again, the audit run concept, C, these are short games, and D, it'll help with the flow of the overall series. Having just reviewed so many Mega Man games puts me exactly in the mindset of understanding exactly how the jumps work, how the weapons work, how the level design works, how the enemy attacks work, and all the tiny little nitty-gritty details that go into reviewing a Mega Man game. So this was an ideal time to do it. So I was like, okay, fine. And all that preface is kind of where we're at now with this audit run. I do thank you for your indulgence in listening to me talk about this. It's just, this has been something that's been on my mind for a while, and as I've said before, I've really wanted to do these reviews for an extraordinarily long period of time. So it's really awesome to do this, especially since I've been wanting to review the Mega Mans as, the Mega Man games are some of the most games I've wanted to review. Like, if I was to sit down and come up with, like, oh, you have 20 games you can review, a large number of those games would be Mega Man games because of how much this has been just a part of my life and how much it's been my wheelhouse. I know everyone calls me the story guy, but I gotta be real. The Mega Man games are my bag, you know? Mega Man and Metroid have been the 2 games that have been part of my core gameplay experience since the NES, since I was in the single-digit range, so yeah, no, it's been really, really awesome to go through these. I came up with some facts and figures for you, just really quick. I just wanted to share these before we get back to actually talking about 11. So, you know I have a concept called the golden number, which takes into account a whole bunch of stuff. Density and duration and variance and the pluses and the minuses and the percentages. And I think there's like one other thing in there. I forget the whole list. It's this huge list of stuff. And that pushes out a final number, and that's the final score, the golden number. That's why I call it that. So, For the X, no, let's go in order. We did the 0 series first. So at the bottom for the 0 series was 0-1. And then, I'm not going to give you the numbers, so I'm just going to slow this down. It was 0-1, then ZX2, then Z2, then 0-4, then ZX1, and on the top of the heap was 0-3, which was by far my favorite of that bundle. And I always like to look at that golden number and say, does that feel right? You know, just a very vague, generalized, yeah, no, that feels right. 0-3 was awesome, ZX1 was awesome, Z4 was awesome, Z2 was okay, ZX2 was alright, and Z1 kind of sucked. Still net positive, but, So then we have the X's, which we did next. This is a funny one, because X1 was 68.01. Just giving that away because it's way up there. It's one of my top-rated games. And then we jump down pretty substantially, but still a very high-rated game with X2, which is in the 40s. And then X5, and then X4. As a reminder, those are so close as to be tied. Then we have X8, which would probably have surpassed them if not for the gutterish stage's design and several aspects of the game. Then we plummet down to X3, which is a net positive game. Remember, anything above 0 is good. But it's only a 6.36, so it's not that high. And then we jump down to X6, which is negative 26. And then we plummet through the floor down to X7 at negative 102.15, also known as the worst game I've ever reviewed. But then we have the classics. I'm going to do the reverse, bottom to top. So we have 1 at the very bottom, which, yeah, that tracks. Then 9, which tracks. Then 3 and 7 are very close to each other. And that makes sense, because both of those are good games, but are very severely hampered by their bugs, their flaws, and the rushed nature of both of them. Because both of them have the same general behind-the-scenes problem, as you've heard. Then we move up to 2. 2 is a simple game, but it is a very good simplicity. Then we move up to 8, which is much more complex, and honestly would probably rate much higher if its story wasn't drivel. But then we move up to 10, which rated much higher than I thought it would. Then we have the top 4. At the number 4 slot, we have 6. The number 3 slot, we have 4. At the number 2 slot, we have 5. And yes, if you're paying any kind of attention, you know that that means that the number 1 slot is 11. And that feels right. It's a shame because there are nitpicks I could absolutely make about this game, and there are things that other Mega Man games do better than this one. But this is an extremely, exceptionally well presented and very well designed game. I gave a plus to all 8 stages for this one, which I think the only other game I did that for was Mega Man 5, and I think X1. I think those 3 are the only ones that got a plus to every stage. The stage design is excellent. The boss design is fantastic. The voice acting is actually good. The animations are phenomenal. The backgrounds are the exact same excellence they were back in 8, which is my other favorite one when it comes to the backgrounds and the sun slowly setting as you're going through the stage, or making your way through the park, or climbing your way up the exercise area, going through the roller coasters. The giant castle you're slowly rotating around as you're going through Wily 1. Wily 1 is probably one of my favorite stages in Mega Man. It is also, in my opinion, one of the hardest stages, one of the properly hardest stages in all of Mega Man. It is a true final exam test course of everything. And the best part is, you can do it Buster only. It is possible, and I have done that before. I got close to doing it this time on camera, and then I died a bunch, so I was like, okay, fine, hang on. Because the game also gives you lots of tools to work with. The weapons are phenomenally designed in this one, with lots of spread. In fact, here, let's just pull up a list of weapons here, because I'm definitely prepared. Did you know I do this for a living? I totally do this for a living. Let's look at our boss layout here, shall we? Gotta be a little bit bright for a second. So, Stone Man... Is it Stone Man? No, of course it's not. It's Block Man. Has this thing where it just generates 4 blocks in the air above you, and... So that's a nice, good screen cleary thing, except for the fact that they are destroyed as soon as they do impact. So you can only hit so many things with them. But if you do the power gear, it throws a lot more on that column. Acid Man gives you the shield, or a much stronger shield, and of course you've got the shots when you're in the acid thing. By the way, this shield is actually really nice. Not only do you have the ability to shoot while in it, but it just doesn't go away from damage for the most part. It can. There are things that can pierce it, and there's piercing type damage. But for the most part, it just stays there until it wears out, which is a fairly long period of time. And there's a nice clear visual indicator of it slowly fading away and then finally going away. Then we have Impact Man, which is the speedrunner's dream. That's the dash. It just straight up gives you a dash. But the best part is it gives you an aerial dash. And it's a way to destroy enemies that otherwise can't be hit because it is a piercing damage attack. Then we have Bounce Man, whose weapon is deceptively powerful. It shoots out 3 bombs things. You can shoot it up, you can shoot it down, and you know how I like to paint the terrain you can hit with stuff? This can just hit the screen. It's just, it just hits everything because it bounces all over the place. The powered-up version shoots even faster spreads in both directions, which is awesome. Then we have Fuse Man. This is your classic ground weapon, but this one actually is probably one of the better ones, right up there with Wave Man's, because it'll actually go up in addition to down, and it keeps going for quite a while. And you can have a much larger one with the power-up thing. You have Tundra Man, which is your vertical column shot from wherever you are. It just hits everything above and below you. So great vertical shot hit there, and a little bit to the sides, of course. And you can do the powered-up version, which just hits the screen. It's the screen clearer, just like Gravity Man's weapon or Tornado Man's weapon. And then we have Torch Man. What is Torch Man's weapon? Oh, God. Oh, right. Torch Man's weapon throws up a ball into the air above you, and then that shoots down at a 45-degree angle downwards, which feels like a weird thing. But in a Mega Man game, that's actually really good at just kind of ignoring terrain. If there's an enemy above you that you can't quite hit, or an enemy on the other side of a wall or whatever, this is the weapon for that. And the powered-up version, of course, does 3 shots with that. Finally, we have Blast Man, which is one of the more clever weapons, and not super useful, but extremely useful if you know what you're doing with it, which throws out a little bomb, which can adhere to stuff. It'll stick to stuff, and then... But it'll also stick to itself. You can get 4 of them together in one bundle, and they don't have to be connected. They just have to be within a range of each other, and they'll kind of have these little wires connecting them, these little electric kind of signals, and then they will make a much larger explosion. This is very useful on very many enemies and a couple of bosses. Or you could just use the powered-up version and just shoot out one giant bomb, which does the same explosion as all 4. And if you're paying attention, I keep mentioning that powered-up version thing, because that's the other thing. The X series does this too. This is, finally, one of the things that the Classic series actually takes from the X series, and years of X design is allowing you to power up the weapons, which either change how they operate, as a couple of the examples, or just make them better, like having more damage or a larger explosion radius, right? And this is good. This really gives us a lot of options for how to actually play the game. And, of course, a lot of these have utility, and that is very much, the levels are very much designed around these, but you don't have to use them. All of those 8 stages you can play Buster only. Now, some of them are a little bit rougher than others. Looking at you, Torch Man, both the stage and the boss there are pretty rough, Buster only. Doable, of course. I don't know how much credit they get for that, because of the other system they added in with this one, which is the gear system. All right, real talk. How many of you who have played Mega Man 11 have this bad habit of forgetting the gears are there and not using it? I put actual effort and thought and work into blowing off this dust on my glasses, as well as to remembering that I actually had the 2 gears and trying to use them as much as I possibly could in this playthrough to try and show them off. I didn't do a super good job because of a mentality I'll talk about in a minute, but it was still awesome how I could just kind of dip in and out of one or the other as I needed. And the fact that it's just right there on the shoulder buttons, or you can rebind it to whatever, but it's a hotkey. You can just rebind it like that. And that's awesome. The fact that you just toggle that on and toggle that off. And it uses a heat mechanic, which is even better. This isn't quite the MechWarrior thing. I said that on stream. But it's kind of leaning towards the MechWarrior thing. You've got your heat bar. It slowly fills up. Once it's full, it's going to take a long time to cool off, and you can't use it in the interim. Or you can manage your heat and turn it off manually before it finishes, and it will cool off quicker. And you can keep using it while it's in this state. As long as it's not in the overheated state, you can use it. The only difference is there's no threat of, Rock actually exploding because he's detonated his own ammo card, something like that. But anyways, his ammo clips. I can talk. So that's an awesome system. The power gear makes your shots do, big, super doomy shots. And of course, as I mentioned, it changes up all the weapons. The speed gear is broken as hell. What it does is it slows everything down a bit. Now, not everything slows down at the same rate, I've noticed. Most things slow down at the same rate, including you. But some specific things, usually environmental hazards, actually slow down a little bit more. And so you have more control over them. And this is also true for things that you wouldn't even consider an environmental hazard, like the rotating wheel platforms in Wily's first stage. Those are much easier to manage if you pop the speed gear and you just go right through it. Allow me to recommend something really quick. I'd like to say I'm a decent Mega Man player, and I'd like to think that I put on a good show in Mega Man 11. However, I am total garbage compared to the people who speedrun this game. If you've ever actually seen, if you have not seen a speedrun of Mega Man 11, I recommend you take a moment to go look it up and watch it sometimes, because they will absolutely weave in and out of all of the tools and the kits that are at your disposal, between the power-ups, the weapons, the powered-up weapons, both gears, and the rush abilities, and just kind of... And there's so much tech in this game, that's what we call it. There's so many tools that the player can use in order to go faster and burn through things, and it's kind of awesome. This game was also definitely made of... This game came out in 2017. The speedrunning community was already, big at this point in time, so... There's also interviews which indicate this game was made with speedrunning in mind, and that's not unusual. The Nintendo games have kind of been thinking in that direction as well as of the last 5 or 6 years, so it's pretty normal. It's good stuff. It's especially good stuff considering the fact that there was an 8-year gap before this. Some of you have heard me refer to the drought, the Megaman drought, and I've referenced this throughout this whole series and on the streams. The idea of when Megaman died, right? You know what that's like. This is most franchises have a period of time when they die. Doctor Who? Anybody? Remember when Doctor Who died for a while there? No, I don't mean the character. I mean the franchise. Someone pulled the plug and they just sat on it. Trek died multiple times. Trek has died twice, actually. Star Wars kind of went dark for a while there at one point in time. And of course, Mega Man went dark prior to this game came out, from about 2009 to about 2017. I forget the exact months. I looked it up, but it is an 8-year gap. And yikes, that's a big gap. They had been trying to get Mega Man going again, but not quite fully. And can I just say, by the way, it's every now and again, it's nice to be confirmed that I'm actually right about something and I'm not wrong about everything like I was worried about. Because it was, in fact, office politics. Don't worry, I'm not going to rehash the whole point, but there were several people who tried to get this going again, and the answer always came up, well, if we do that, we're going to have to pull resources away from this thing. And then so those managers and those executives and those producers said no. And so Mega Man just stayed on ice. Until finally one man who... Oh my god, I didn't write down his name. Are you kidding me? I didn't write down his name. Holy crap. I think it's Koichi Oda, but I want to look that up really quick. So give me just 1 second. Thankfully, I still have the tab here because I have his interview right here. Koji Oda. I was close. Koji Oda. And he's someone who's been with Capcom since the late 80s, early 90s. He was actually the director for what was that game called? I wrote it down here. Mighty Final Fight. Mighty Final Fight, which was an NES game, which is actually surprisingly good. He worked on Resident Evil, as in he helped develop the concept of Resident Evil before he was even called that. There's a few other things. But the long and the short of it is, he said, and I'm just going to quote this word for word, I still feel like Mega Man is one of the most important pillars of the company. At the end of the day, we asked ourselves, what does Capcom need to do for its fans? Should we act like Mega Man is a thing of the past? Should we toss him aside? I felt like it would be a foolish gesture. Mega Man is such a treasure to the company that it would be a waste to let him go just because somebody left. And so he put forth his pitch, and most likely, I'm not sure about this, but based on what I've seen, is most likely the one who invented the gear system and the concepts that added. And he pitched it successfully. And since he's a fairly successful person within Capcom and has been with them for so long, he was able to pull enough political clout to actually get Mega Man 11 greenlit. And they threw weight behind it, too. Now, remember, this is also when Capcom was turning it around. We've had a bit of a break since Mega Man 10, and now Capcom has already had their dip and has already started pulling out of that. We've had Street Fighter 4, we've had Monster Hunter World, we've had, I think Devil May Cry 5 actually predates us. I'm not actually sure about that, so don't quote me on that. I do know that Mega Man 11 and Devil May Cry 5 were developed at the same time. That is something I'm aware of. So either way, they were starting to pull themselves back out of the pit, and they actually threw weight and money and effort into Mega Man 11, and by God, it shows. This is actually a fully well-fleshed-out Mega Man game, of which we only have a few. We've got X5, X4, X1, kind of X8. Then we have 01, which is funny when you think about it. And then we have, I guess 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8 for the classics. And then this one, obviously. And all of these had a fairly large amount of resources and effort put in. And it tends to show, is what I'm trying to say. It's not a guarantee, of course. I mean, you can polish up FIFA however much you want, but it's always going to be FIFA, right? No offense to FIFA fans. The games. I mean, if you're a fan of FIFA, the organization, we might have words, but no offense to anybody who likes the games. What's really cool, though, is they went all the way back to some of the original design documents by Akira Kitamura. You may or may not remember me mentioning him, as he was the person who invented Mega Man all the way back in Mega Man 1. And one of the things he really wanted to do was have Rock actually change appearance as he takes on the power-ups. You know, the arm and the jaw for Gutsman, and actually having like the bulbous body for Bombman. And they couldn't do it because it was a NES game in the mid-'80s. But they finally decided to go back to that and actually do that, at least a little bit. And so Rock does change appearance, which isn't just a cosmetic thing. It's also helpful because it is yet another visual indicator of the fact that you have changed power-ups. If you happen to have some kind of color blindness or other visual issues with regards to distinction, you can still tell pretty much at a glance what power-up you have, not only based on your appearance, but on your color scheme. And that's cool. There's a lot of little quality of life features like that, like the fact that I mentioned earlier, you have the charge buttons on the triggers. You also can swap weapons again, thankfully. I don't know why they ever got rid of that feature. And you've got a dedicated button for the Rush Jet and a dedicated button for the Rush Coil, which I can't believe it's taken that long to do this either. Because that's nice too. You can, especially since one of the things that helps you to do is to navigate your weapons very quickly. Obviously you can hit this pause menu, but that kind of interrupts flow. Being able to shoot out a power-up and then hit X, which is your rush button, you might think, why would you do that? Because it immediately puts you back into U mode. It just puts you back to being Mega Man, right? Instead of actually being in Torchman mode or whatever. And of course you've got the right trigger stick, which allows you to have the little shortcut thing, which all of this can be rebound, by the way. And then you've got the pause menu, which has a wonderful interface. And by the way, another little anecdote. So we've got the shop is back, and it's got all its upgrades, like things that make you get knocked back less, or increases the height of your buster, or makes you auto-charge so you don't have to hold down the shoot button all the time. Usual array of cool stuff. There's also something that increases the heat venting of the gear system, so you can use that more often. And there's others. I'm not going to list the whole list, but there's a bunch of cool stuff. Most of them are mutators. Most of them are useful. The thing that's awesome about this, you can turn them off. You might think, why would you ever want to turn a power-up off? Challenge modes, or just to try it out, or just to challenge yourself. You don't even have to do a challenge mode if you just want to. Like, you know what? I feel like that's too overpowered. You can just turn it off like that, which is an awesome feature. Devil May Cry 5 did something similar. Like I said, the two games kind of shared some development. We also had the shop. And so I mentioned the shop. We kind of talked about this. This is probably the best version of the shops. Because again, just having a shop isn't a good or a bad thing. It depends on how much you price things. And it depends on your rate of income with regards to currency. This game kind of leans on the shop, similar to 9 and 10, in the sense that they don't really drop a lot of items in the stages, and if you're playing on superhero mode, they don't drop anything in the stages, so a lot of your item usage is going to lean entirely on the shop. But if you're playing on anything other than superhero mode, most of those, the design of how many bolts drop is pretty specifically geared towards you leaning on the shop for your lives, for your E-tanks, and for your other upgrades. And it is well balanced. They do actually design it well. It is unnecessary, I think, because I think they could have just put this stuff in the game, but it does give you the option of just not picking up things or not buying things or whatever. So it's a good thing. It's just, it's not perfect. This is still probably the best shop we've seen in the series. We've also got, you can also just switch to the shop after a stage if you want to, and you can continue. I can stage select, and oh, guess what? For I believe the first time, the Wily Castle is just a straight up stage select. You can just pick which stage you want to go to. So there's no lost progress. If you like, you remember how in Mega Man 9, if you leave if you don't continue at a stage, you go back to Wily 1. And how in Mega Man 10, if you do anything, if you go back to the stage select, you go back to Wily 1. All that's gone because you can just go back to the stage select and go to the save and quit the game and go have dinner and dance and sing and talk and laugh and have fun and then come back and then just right back where you were. To be frank, as it should be. It's a shame because this game also has fantastic difficulty design, except when it's really frustrating. Hear me out for a second. So we've got 4 difficulties: superhero, normal, easy, and newcomer. Okay. Now, this is the same good difficulty that Mega Man 10 did. It changes some of the layout of the stages, it changes which enemies spawn where, which items drop from enemies, which items are placed in the stage, how the enemies attack, and how the bosses attack. Now, on the easier stuff, it reduces the damage you take. On a superhero, it makes you take more damage. But otherwise, it is a very well-designed difficulty system. With one notable exception. Now, this may be me being greedy, but in my book, what I want is the difficulty options. So let's look at everything that it does, right? Enemy drops, okay. Stage drops, okay. damage you take, okay, checkpoints, which is an important one, boss patterns, and I think knockback. And I feel like that's it. I might be missing something, but so what I want these 6 things to be toggles. I want them to be sliders. Anybody who's played Pathfinder Kingmaker or The Last of Us 2 or Dishonored 2, these are good examples of games that rather than just saying easy, medium, hard, they give you the specific options that those difficulties affect, and then you can adjust them however you want. That's the ideal difficulty option kind of a thing for me. So in this case, for example, what I would love to do is crank up the damage, remove the item drops, remove the enemy drops, and just basically crank everything up to superhero difficulty, except... lives, that's the other thing. Except crank the checkpoint things down. And you're probably thinking, well, that's just easy mode. No. Because there's still a lot of issues with that. But more to the point, let's call this what it is. That would be the... I still can't think of the name of it. Celeste. That would be the Celeste mode, which is exactly what I kind of want for this. I want to be properly challenged and properly tasked and okay, I got to get past this screen and I got to get it through it without getting hit. And oh God, And that's the kind of thing I would absolutely love to be able to do in this game. I can't. So instead, I just play on normal or superhero, and I just live with effectively having really bad checkpoint placement because, let's be honest, they're not really good. It's the same problem. It's the exact same problem Mega Man 9 had, and it's one of the extremely few gameplay negatives I had to give this game. The checkpoints in any proper difficulty are not great. They're really long stages and usually have 1 checkpoint, occasionally 2, plus the boss one, and that's it. So that kind of sucks. Anyways, other than that, though, very good game, and it kind of shows. Because this game is the 2nd best-selling Mega Man game ever. Which prompts a question. Where has Mega Man been for the last 4 years? This came out in 2017. For those of you watching in the future, as of the time of this recording, it is late 2021. It is November of 2021. And there has not even been a peep, rumor, or hint, teaser, or announcement of any other Mega Man products. Now... that's fine. That's not true. That's not true. We have the garbage Mobage games. That's always nice. But no, in all honesty, I think there's 2 things at play here, personally. One, despite being such a very well-selling game, it doesn't sell as well as a lot of the other titles. It's the Metroid problem. Which is funny, because I just mentioned how Metroid and Mega Man are my wheelhouse. But Metroid games generally don't sell like your Mega Mans, like your Marios or your Zeldas. And Mega Mans don't sell like your Resident Evils or your Monster Hunters. Those are much, much higher sales figure games. And so I think this is just getting less iteration, less time, less money, less weight. Because even when it sold really well, it still sold below expectations. Remember, even Mega Man 2 was under expectations, and that's their best-selling Mega Man game. So... I think that's the first thing, and I think the second thing is the guy who went to bat for Mega Man 11 probably went on to other projects. So, I have no idea if we're ever going to get another Mega Man game of any kind that isn't this Mobage. By the way, if you've never heard the term, mobile garbage, it's Mobage. And it is Mobage, let's just be very clear. There are mobile games that are games, they're good games. This is gotcha, Mobage, loot box garbage. It's trash. And yes, I have played it to make that opinion. I haven't talked about the story. For once, I'm going to talk about the story last, because this is the other thing Mega Man 11 does very well, and kind of badly. We actually have, honest-to-goodness, real voice acting. Holy crap, there's a rarity in the Mega Man series. But we also, and I know, you all like the Dr. Wily. I don't blame you, but I do like it when we have actual voice acting and actual voice direction in this franchise. So, we have actual voice acting. Cool. We get backstory. Mega Man 11 is a soft reboot, on purpose. This is stated by interviews. They wanted this to be a game that was accessible to the old players, but was probably the first game several people had played in the franchise. So they wanted to establish Dr. Light and establish Dr. Wily, and that's it. Now, in fairness, there's actually a decent amount of characterization for both Light and Wily in this game. It's just they're the only ones who really get any characterization. Rock is there, and he's a good guy. Roll is there, and she's cool. Otto's there, and he's comic relief. And then the boss is there, and they barely have a personality. Cool. More of their personality is in their bio than in the actual game. But we see that Dr. Light was really pushing for independent thought robots, and Wily was pushing for improving the capability of robots. From this simple perspective, which both of them still share, and if we're being honest, kind of continues in their legacy into the X's and the Z's, this showcases what they wanted from the robotic field. Dr. Wily wanted superior tools to help uplift humanity and to help keep us moving forwards. Dr. Light wanted equals. He wanted children. He wanted to have family members and friends and people he could interact with. And so we could see how these two lines of thought lead to eventually to X and Zero. Consequently, I have to point out the fact that the speed gear is blue and the red gear is power. The power gear is red, excuse me. And there's certainly some hints in that direction. But at the same time, one of the other tidbits we get in this game, which I actually like, is how much Light and Wily are still fond of each other in their own kind of bickering kind of a way. Frenemies, I think is what that's called. Because when Dr. Wily shows up, he's like, ha, speed gear, and then he's out. Dr. Light still has the original prototype double gear. He still kept it. He still held on to it all these years because it was still something that mattered to him, because of sentimental value, or whatever you want to call that. And of course, Dr. Wily at no point in time tries to hurt or harm Light, even when he has multiple opportunities to do so. And in fact, he's mostly just trying to showcase his genius. He's trying to showcase that he was right, that this is the way things should be. Because Dr. Wily, I know I've said it a few times, is not evil. And a lot of the characterization that I've been speaking of throughout this whole Rumination series actually comes from this game, because this is our big Dr. Wily characterization moment. We get a couple other tidbits like Megaman 10 and Megaman 9, but this is the big one right here. We even get a little bit of echo of Megaman 9, by the way. At one point, Dr. Light reveals that he saved the destroyed Androbots, the Robot Masters. And it's okay, because we're going to be able to go ahead and let them keep being useful. They can keep doing things. I mean, he says they can keep doing good, but let's be clear. This ties in perfectly with the idea of you have to be useful or you're trash, which was something that was established in Megaman 9, so that's fun. The disappointment comes from the ending. Now, I know, it's a soft reboot, but this would be the perfect time to do this, in my opinion. At the end, they have this whole build-up. Like, Dr. Light obviously cares, and the two obviously have this frenemy situation. And Dr. Light goes and confronts Dr. Wily personally after he's been defeated, and then reaches out a hand in friendship. And he almost straight up references the X and the Zero series, how the bond between X and Zero would shape the future forevermore. You know, our gears meshing kind of a thing. And he says, why don't you go ahead and join me? And Dr. Wily says, nah, I'm good, and then pieces out. And that's just really disappointing. It would be a cliche if Dr. Wily was like, okay, fine, I'll come back with you. Hesitance. But it would be better than just smashing the reset button as hard as possible and going back to the status quo. And furthermore, it kind of throws... The whole game has been building up to the relationship between these two men. And then it just throws it out the window for no reason other than we have to maintain the status quo. So it's disappointing, and it's actually derogatory towards the rest of the narrative. And that's why I'm so bothered by it. I'm curious, as always, of your thoughts. Because I have to admit, I don't have an easy solution for something that isn't a cliche to follow through other than Wily taking up Light on his offer. That being said, several people in chat who are, as I've said many times, smarter than I am, came up with a few cool ideas. One of them was maybe there's another villain that completely upstages Wily. You have them swoop in towards the ending, and Wily, well, he's not a good guy, but he's not going to be upstaged. I'm the villain. Do you see the skull thing? I've got the branding thing going on. No way. Light, come on. Let's go power up Rock. We got to defeat this thing. You can't tell me that wouldn't work. And there's a couple other ideas that we could go with. I'm curious of your ideas, but I think for now we're going to go ahead and close this Mega Man retrospective. This has been an awesome series. I have loved going through and reviewing this whole thing. Finally, this is basically a check marking something off of the bucket list kind of a deal for me. So I'm pretty happy. I'm also pretty exhausted, so I'm going to go lay down for a minute and hopefully not get buried in sharks. I'll see you around, guys.